first thing to do is for me to welcome you to this webinar. It's one that we're very excited about. It's involved a slight pivot from an in-person meetup event to an online webinar, but we're still really excited for it to be the launch of techUK's Photonics Sprint Campaign, and for the fantastic speakers that we have today, and to share a bit more information about just what we have coming up over the next 5 months in photonics. And the answer is an awful lot. So firstly, let me introduce myself. I'm Rory. I lead techUK's emerging technology and innovation activity. So work with lots of our most innovative member companies, of which we have just over 1,100 members, to convene the tech sector, to share examples of best practice and thought leadership, and to shape government's thinking around the future of emerging technologies. I'll also hand over to Ella to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Ella. I'm a Junior Programme Manager in Emerging Tech at techUK, and I work across a variety of emerging tech work that goes on here, but primarily the Photonics Sprint Campaign. So yeah, looking forward to sharing some more details with you in this webinar.
Fantastic, thanks Ella. So in terms of just what we have coming up over this webinar, here's the agenda. So we're going to start by just briefly outlining who techUK are and what we've got coming up in photonics and how you can get involved. So myself and Ella will do that. Then we'll hand over to our guest speakers to talk about what they're up to across the photonics landscape in the UK, and in particular what opportunities they see for UK leadership. So we've got Dr. Justina from Cornerstone, who I much valued member of ours that we were at only last week, which was a very interesting visit. And we've got Daniel from Plexel as well, another valued member of ours. And then Thales from our satellite and telecoms program is going to join as well to tell us what he's getting up to in optical comms that is quite heavily relevant to the photonics conversation. After each person presents, we'll hand over to the floor. If anybody has any questions or observations, please post them in the chat as you go along, but also feel free after each person presents to come off mute and share a question to our speakers. And then finally, we will have a bit of time at the end. We're going to do this in person, but we can still do it online, just to invite attendees to come off mute and very briefly say who they are and what the rest of the community should know, essentially. And we find that this really helps with joining people up, particularly if you kind of chuck your email in the chat after you do so, and people can reach out to you for more information. So that's how the next hour is going to look. Lots of information to get through, and I'll begin very briefly by just saying who we are. It's probably a good place to start. So techUK is the membership body for the tech industry in the UK, or the trade association. As I mentioned, we've got just over 1,100 member companies, most of those startups and SMEs that are UK based, reflective of the UK's tech sector, but virtually all of the world's largest tech companies in our membership as well. And we essentially work to advance the development, application and commercialization of technology across the UK. We do that through three things. The first is developing markets. So we've got about 20 different parts or teams across techUK are the interface between the tech industry and government. So health and social care, defence and national security, transport, cyber, financial services, etc. So that's a big part of what we do, connecting our customers, our members, to government as potential customers. Secondly, we champion what our members are doing, so championing tech and innovation there, lots of speaking, writing opportunities, thought leadership, podcasts, reports, case studies, all that sort of stuff. And then thirdly, we shape, as I said, government's thinking around where tech, innovation, digitalization are heading, engaging with policy officials, ministers, regulators, etc. So that's us. And what about photonics? So I'm going to hand over to Ella, who's going to very briefly walk us through um, the next 5 months of techUK activity. It's on a slide, so don't worry, not too intense, but lots of really exciting stuff coming up that I'm sure everyone on this call would benefit from getting involved in. So Ella, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Rory. So today, we are launching our Photonics Sprint Campaign. This will be a 5-month initiative where we'll be asking the question, how can the UK lead in photonics development and deployment? And to do this, we'll be bringing the sector together through a variety of workshops, roundtables, webinars, in-person events, all of which are outlined here on this slide. This is to try and convene the sector and look at applications, best practice, challenges and opportunities around the photonics sector and the role that the UK plays within it. So kicking off today with some more information and also to hear some insights from industry leaders. And then we have our clusters webinar coming up in a couple of weeks where we will be exploring a few different best case practices from the UK's clusters, or I think lost, oh, thank you, from the UK's clusters and kind of asking how industry can engage with them. We are also calling for contributions to our Insight series, which will be an opportunity for organisations or individuals working in photonics to provide a thought leadership piece around kind of how the UK is developing or deploying photonics, or maybe what your organisation or what you are doing kind of within the photonics sector. We then have some more sector-specific events coming up in November and December, so one around telecoms and space, which we'll be sharing some more information on later on in this session, defence and also supply chain resilience with a particular focus on quantum and semiconductors within that event as well. We also have an international event which we're scoping for January to kind of explore more what this might look like on an international level, and we'll be wrapping up this sprint in January. And all the findings and key insights from this pipeline from the events will form a report which we'll publish in 2026, and this will highlight key recommendations and policy asks of how we can kind of further develop the photonics sector in the UK and yeah, enable the UK to lead further. Have the next slide, please, Rory. So this just highlights a few different members, stakeholders and other organisations who we've been speaking to when we've been scoping this pipeline. So we've been kind of going out to industry to see what would be most useful for us to explore as part of this sprint campaign. And we're very open to speaking to anyone else working in the sector, individuals, organisations. So yeah, please do get in touch with us if you'd like to contribute your thoughts. Thanks, Rory,
Thanks,
over
Ella.
to you.
Brilliant. So next, just to flag the next event in this sprint campaign after today's launch, and that is all around the UK's photonics clusters, taking place on the 22nd of this month, online and intended to be online. And we've got 3 fantastic speakers to join us for that as well. So if you're interested in learning more about the photonics clusters across the UK, about how they are currently working with industry, and they'll share lots of examples of best practice, how best to engage with clusters. And we'll also talk about the wider kind of cluster landscape in the UK and what more government could do to support their development, and industry could do to feed into shaping and enhancing their offering as well. So should be a really insightful session from representatives of 3 different clusters across the UK. So please do scan that QR code and sign up with to secure your free ticket. Finally, from me and Ella, just to say that as Ella mentioned, at the end of the sprint campaign, we will produce a report that will contain policy recommendations that essentially would be our techUK's position and therefore our members' position on just where the UK is when it comes to photonics, just what more should be done, and just what government can do to help us get there. So as a flavour of what these policy recommendations could cover, it's everything from skills and international partnerships to cross-government, raising awareness, building credibility, promoting the voice of the sector, and then also policy asks that tie into other areas of techUK's activity. So we flag here our UK plan for chips, which was published by our semiconductor programme, already talks about R&D, pilot lines, lots of lasers, power electronics, lots of relevant things to photonics. So we're not going to reinvent the wheel. We're going to use lots of existing policy asks, both from techUK and be that Photonics Leadership Group or lots of other authorities in this space. Definitely not looking to duplicate, but really keen to get the views of everybody on this call moving forward as we shape those asks, and we really add value wherever possible to the photonics conversation and leverage techUK's expertise, networks, and reach to promote photonics and advance their development and application in the UK. That was a long sentence. So please do get in touch if you have any specific policy asks you think we should be championing. And I will leave it there on that, because those are very much to be formed throughout this sprint campaign, but just a flavour. And then finally to say that, again, here are our contact details. We're very contactable despite our the size of our inboxes, and you can find out more about the sprint campaign by scanning this QR code, which will be throughout these slides. Brilliant. So if there are any immediate questions, very happy to take one or two now before we move to our first presentation. I'll pause here. Feel free to put up your hand or come off mute.
Hello, good afternoon. Mayela from the National Physical Laboratory. I just wanted to ask, do you have a kind of expected date on when this report, on mapping the UK landscape in photonics, you're expected to be completed?
That's a very good question. So the final event of the sprint campaign will happen in January, and we'll be then writing the report in the months that follow that. So early 2026 is the best estimate we can give you at this time. If there's a key event or milestone that we could align the report around and the launch of the report, then we're very receptive to that. So if you have any thoughts, please drop us a message, but otherwise we'll be writing the report from January for well, I mean, writing it a little before that, but early 2024 is the best I can say at this stage.
Thank you very much.
No worries. Brilliant. Okay, and therefore I will hand over to our first speaker, Dr. Justina, who will talk us through Cornerstone and the Photonics Innovation Centre.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Justina Liszinska. I am a Specialist Policy Officer for Cornerstone Photonics Innovation Centre. And for those of you who don't know what Cornerstone Photonics Innovation Centre is, we just recently, just over a year, turned into Knowledge Innovation Centre. We are an open access foundry providing silicon photonics prototyping facilities for academia and businesses. And for those of you who don't know what a silicon photonics chip is, I've got a small sample here. So basically, it's a very tiny chip, which is made on silicon material. The difference in traditional chips is that we use light instead of electricity. And that difference is significant because of that, we can achieve much faster data transmission and lower energy loss. So I think I want to start, we can move to the next slide, just to give you a bit of a view of the photonics sector. And perhaps many of you are very much aware of these statistics, but I think the crucial aspect here is to mention about the employment number. So it's 84,800 people employed in the photonics industry. And this number is actually bigger than people employed in automotive, pharma or chemical manufacturing industries. Next slide. And in terms of photonics, where it sits, within the government growth mission, in some of the papers is directly mentioned, but of course, photonics as a sector is still not widely recognized as AI, or even semiconductors themselves, because obviously photonics as a whole sector, they never received the same amount of publicity. And of course, in a sense, photonics is a light. So it's something that, it's very easily to take for granted. It's almost like you need light, you need but you may be just not aware how useful is that. And also we didn't have such a major breakthrough in news like a shortage of chips, let's say, to be able to, I don't know, public be more aware of the photonics importance. Next slide. But in terms of support, sorry, the previous slide. But in terms of the support for the government structure, for the government strategy, all of the technologies which I've mentioned, so AI, quantum, they would need hardware. And I think that's where photonics as a sector becomes crucial. Next slide. So in terms where we think as an organization, as Cornerstone, where the UK government can lead, we think it's in silicon photonics. And just to give you another statistic, so the growth rate is quite significant because it's between 20-25% of projected compound annual growth rate. And most of the commercial application has been already proven in data centers, but of course, there are many other potentials. Next slide, please. So for example, there is a lot of applications in defense, environmental monitoring, quantum, future telecoms, healthcare. And I think the crucial aspect in that conversation is that there is not yet that many dominant global players. So there are huge opportunities for the UK sector. Next slide, please. And of course, we've got a very strong research base. So we've got University of Cambridge, Glasgow, University of Southampton. So our research center, Optoelectronics Research Center, is one of the pioneering groups in silicon photonics. It has been set up in 1989. And we do have like a world first records, some of them even before became the industry standard. Next slide, please. So in terms of the opportunities for the UK, we really think that there's a huge potential for the UK sector as a whole. But to reach that, the industry would need integration via silicon photonics. And I think very often I've seen the conversation when people mention the space age enabled semiconductor sector, the internet age enabled photonics, and the data age will further enable photonics and silicon photonics. But of course, this is just, it sounds all nice, but in order to achieve it, the UK does require the right infrastructure. It's something that we heard from our industrial partners, that they need pilot lines, so basically facilities where they can test and scale their businesses. So we would hope that the UK government not only recognize the potential in silicon photonics, but also provide facilities or infrastructure for UK businesses to be able to innovate and scale in the UK rather than moving outside. Next slide, please. And I think just, we truly believe that if you want to compete in electronics, semiconductors, that's rather impossible for the UK. But silicon photonics infrastructure require much lower investment. And we have already a good established world-class research labs and expertise. So in a sense, we're trying to say that, this is one of the battles that the UK government can pick. It's a niche area, but I think there is a huge potential. Next slide, please. So we've got some upcoming news. So we'll be launching Cornerstone Open Source Process Design Kit. In partnership with the magazine New Statements, we will be hosting a panel at the Labour Party conference on 29th of September. The panel discussion will be how can investment in the photonics industry promote economic growth and sovereign resilience. We hopefully to have that. We hope to have that discussion in front of ministers and other policymakers. We will be also launching CIPIC Startup Support Scheme in October, and I've noticed that some people from Cornerstone, Annette, she knows a lot about support scheme. And there is another upcoming event which is more political. So it's a policy workshop on exploring the infrastructure needs for silicon photonics especially. So that's going to be on the 15th of October. Next slide, please. So we've got our membership page. If you would like to join us and get like a first-hand news about upcoming events or what sort of support we provide for businesses, please do sign up. I think the form is fairly easy and very, very quick to do. And also, I should mention, if there are any other questions, we've got also 2 members of Cornerstone during this call, Andy and Annette. So please feel free to ask any questions. I am more policy-oriented person, so I'm happy more to discuss policy questions, but Annette can definitely answer more questions about startup support, and Andy, in general, I think questions will be also applicable to him.
Fantastic. Thanks, Justina. That was really useful information, and yeah, I'm a bit jealous of how large your QR code is, because Ella, I think we need to make ours a bit bigger to compete. So I think let's open just if anybody has any immediate questions for Justina about anything she set out or for Cornerstone more widely. I'll just pause there. Feel free to come off mute or raise your hand or post it in the chat.
Hello, this is Ilaria. Could you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm Ilaria Sanzari. I am an engineer by background. I have been in photonics only for a few months, but my out of curiosity, basically. So what's the UK plan for the future? So it's just providing prototyping, or with the pilot plan is basically the idea to provide also commercial chips or commercial products for certain type of industry?
So that's a very good question. I think this is something that we're still exploring, and that's why we're hosting this workshop on 15th of October, where we're inviting companies as well to tell us what they need in order to actually for their businesses to grow. So in a sense, I don't have a straight answer to that, but I think it's definitely something that is on our radar to explore. So.
Okay, thank you.
Just on the back of that, if I can jump in, Justina, I'm curious to get your take. So you mentioned that photonics is included in a number of government strategies, sometimes mentioned explicitly, sometimes kind of maybe bundled in a bit more. Are you getting the sense that this is heading in the right direction? Government are increasingly realizing that they should be talking about and investing in photonics. Is that happening, do you think?
So I think definitely we're getting much better recognition than we had in the past. And with the different sort of papers, I think the awareness still lies more with civil servants, I would say. So in terms of actually raising this awareness for the government to understand its potential, there is still much more work to do, especially at ministerial level. So actually, truly, the government knows that it has enormous potential in leading in that sector, and it's already at front. And it's not all about AI, right? But I guess we're not there yet, but we're slowly getting there, and having, you know, events like this, having techUK Sprint Campaign, we hope can help to actually raise that awareness, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, we hope so too. So we'll see how the next 5 months go, but we're very confident that, yeah, government
And I
are
should
prone
also
to.
mention that photonics, it is mentioned in some papers, but it's still, it doesn't have a significant significant recognition. I think it's still seen as a more enabling technology for different sectors, rather than just sector of on its own, and how much it's actually contributing to the whole UK economy. So that's another thing to remember.
Yeah, that's a good point. Brilliant. Unless there are any further questions, I think we will.
I think Ellis has his hand raised, Rory.
Sorry, can't see because I'm presenting. Ellis, go for it.
Brilliant, thank you, Rory, and yeah, thank you, Justina. That was really, really interesting. Just as a quick intro, so my name's Ellis, and I manage techUK's semiconductor work. Something that we talk about a lot with semiconductors is the idea of getting more people into the sector, and kind of the skills pipeline in general. In particular, this tends to be the case around kind of getting more women into the sector, right? You know, that tends to be an issue around kind of a lot of emerging techs, right? I'm sure you've seen that we say that VC investment, something like 2% will go to an all-female team. Semiconductor founders, I think it's, you know, over 90% is all male teams as well. I assume, first of all, is this also the case kind of for the photonics sector? I suppose as a second question as well, I think I remember reading that Cornerstone tends to be quite good on this issue. Is there any kind of learnings or any kind of reflections you may have around, yeah, how we can just get more people in general into the sector?
Yes, I think that's a very good question. I think that's the issue that spans across different technologies. So it's not only semiconductors, it's not only photonics, it's also AI, quantum, anything which is more sciencey topic. It's like how to get more diversity and female people involved. Cornerstone is doing especially well in that regard because we have first of all, we have a program that very much sets the job applications that are written in equality, diversity, and inclusion in mind. So in terms of, for example, research technicians, we've got a quite good ratio of female people. On the other hand, we've got also a significant program, ME-DI, which in short, basically ME, equality, diversity, and inclusion time. So every member of our team has allocated funds, significant funds. I think it's £1,000 per year, and also time to use it as they wish to use it. So there is no so much oversight. So it's not like something that your manager tells you to do, which is usually like if you've got some funds within the company, it's more like there is an oversight. But here it's more like, okay, you choosing how you want to develop that further, how you want to progress with your career, how you want to, like, what does it mean for you? And I think it's amazing. I personally have been using a lot of these funds and also time allocated. So because it helps you to be in ownership, how you want to also drive this career, and how you want to be more visible in technological sector. But I mean, this is something that we try to do, but I don't necessarily know whether that's going to be the answer for every photonics company and every sector. And I would love to bring Annette to that discussion because I think Annette was also very heavily involved in diversity. I don't know, Annette, if you've got anything to add.
Yeah, no, yeah, basically just building on what you sort of said there, which is key to us, working with our, you know, the ME-DI team, and even just getting advice on the wording that we're using, where we have restructured the way that we're wording things, for example, like our startup support application form, things like that, without realizing it. I think that there are, you know, terminology, words that we're using that are actually stopping more females from applying, simply because of the types of wording that we're using. We're also doing a series of female founders networking breakfasts with the aim to get to the root of the issue and work on overcoming them. And so I think it's a number of things. We're all aware of the problem, and I think we're just, Cornerstone does it so well because we've just got these little things that we've got in place that we're working on that, we're trying to, increase the number and do all we can to understand. And finally, we're aligning ourselves with charities that are working with lots of underrepresented groups. It's also about the lack of diversity, ethnic diversity as well. So we're working with charities that are dealing with sort of school age, 14, 15 years of age, and we're working with them. We've got some things in the pipeline for next year where we're going to be actually working at putting together some workshops on, deep tech, entrepreneurship, and breaking down those barriers, because I think that there are a lot of things out there that people assume are associated with the sciences and with deep tech and entrepreneurship. Sorry for anyone that doesn't know, I manage the startup program, hence why I'm heavily, focused on that area. But naturally, as the point is, we haven't seen enough females applying. And so, yeah, those are the key areas that we're working on, and we're hoping that over the next sort of year or so, we'll start to see the results of the work that we're implementing now.
Amazing. Well, thanks again, Justina, for that presentation. Thanks, Annette, for jumping in, and Ellis, and for your question there as well. I think let's move on to Daniel, and we've got another great presentation coming. Also, Ella will put in the chat a link to our Skills, Talent and Diversity program where we're covering all of these issues plus more. So we'd love to get you involved in all of that work, really important work as well. Daniel, over to you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Rory. Let me just get up my slides. Brilliant. Thank you, Rory, for that introduction, and thanks, Rory and Ella, for inviting me to talk here today. I'm going to give a brief overview on how we see the UK photonics landscape, start with some introductions, I guess. So here at Plexel, we are an innovation services company. We focus on a few different branches of the business. We have physical sites where we host a bunch of startups across Manchester, Stratford here in London, and Cheltenham. We also run accelerator programs in conjunction with industry and government. And we have a consultancy branch where I sit, and we advise government and industry on emerging technologies. And we particularly sit at the intersection between startups, academia, government, and industry. So personal background, I have a PhD from the University of Southampton in silicon photonics. Really amazing to see how far Cornerstone has come. I used to actually work in that clean room. I did my PhD sentence there. Brilliant facilities, really amazing technology coming out of there. I've also done a postdoctoral research at the Nanyang Technological University. We were trying to make germanium-based lasers. They don't really work, unfortunately. I wish someone had told me that maybe 7 years ago. But a lot of amazing technology has spun out from those kind of initial researches, and yeah, it's a really exciting kind of area. They call it the holy grail of silicon photonics, because silicons are not actually very good at making light. So if you can make a laser from silicon, it's kind of like a Nobel Prize level innovation. And after I came back from Singapore, I worked for a company called Folex, which unfortunately doesn't exist anymore, but they were a startup developing photonic integrated circuits for servers, basically, transceivers. So here at Plexel, I'm an innovation consultant. Again, I work sort of in the interface between government, industry, academia, and startups. So over the last year, I probably interviewed, including Cornerstone, about 70 CEOs, academics, worked and delivered to about 12 government agencies. So I'm hoping today I can provide some sort of insight of that crossover between these key players in the photonics ecosystem. So just to give a bit of an overview of how vast photonics actually is and why it can be so difficult sometimes to communicate between these different players and to kind of develop photonics technology, because you need a vast set of skills, talent, and resources, really. So just off the bat, you have a range of different materials. Cornerstone, as you just mentioned, works mostly in silicon, and materials like silicon nitride and silicon oxide. But there's a range of other materials such as 3,5 compound semiconductors, so group 3 and group 5 on the periodic table, those bonded together, and they make really good lasers and cameras. And a bunch of new exciting stuff coming out, like lithium niobate. You might have heard of graphene, which is a 2D material, 1 atomic layer thick. So there's a huge range of materials you can pick from. And then you need to take those materials and start turning them into something. So there's all these design considerations. You've got to design your mask layout to fabricate the chip. You've got to do a bunch of simulation. Then you've got to go into the clean room. So something like Cornerstone, for example, and you've got to do the lithography, so transfer the pattern, do the etching, deposition. And then after that, you've got to package it up. You've got to make sure, you can put it into a systems level, and you've got to test everything. I'm sure a lot of people here who've worked in photonics have spent many a dark night in a lab locked away tuning lasers. It's quite an intensive process, and it requires a lot of sophisticated equipment. And then once you get to that, there's a range of different devices. So you start with your light sources, you have lasers or LEDs that produce the light. You have a bunch of what we call passive components, so something like a waveguide to guide the light around. And then things like modulators, which change the signals, and then detectors, like basically cameras, photodiodes, which measure the light. And then you combine those into systems, things like transceivers for servers, PICs, as mentioned before, LiDARs, loads of different things. And then there's a bunch of different application spaces like telecom, AI, biomedical, quantum, national security and defense, which is a whole different ballgame, and AR and VR. So there's so many different moving parts. There's so many different requirements, so many different layers. It can be really complicated, and it can be really difficult to communicate this across these different key players. And we'll discuss in a little bit how that translates into some challenges, but also some opportunities for the UK. So just to briefly touch on, I think we've got some really interesting techUK events coming up, which I'm really excited for, which will go into way more detail. But we have a really amazing UK photonics ecosystem. If you want to take it all the way back to Maxwell, who came up with the electromagnetic equations, we have a rich heritage in photonics. Southampton, in particular, a lot of optic fiber technology is developed there, amazing for PICs. We've got other universities like Bristol in the south, Cambridge, Oxford. In the north, we've got Sheffield, Manchester, Durham. Really, really amazing universities in that space. Northern Ireland, we have companies like Andor, who make cameras. They're a spin-out of Oxford Instruments. They invented the EMCCD. And Seagate, which I think we'll have a talk during the techUK set of events. In Wales, we have the compound semiconductors. So I mentioned those 3-5 materials. That's one strength of the UK, and kind of focusing on those as a sort of side focus to silicon. And in Scotland, they have the University of Edinburgh, Glasgow, Heriot-Watt, really amazing centre for quantum technologies, and actually, surprisingly, really good for detectors and cameras. And we're going to touch on that a little bit as a case study here. So again, the UK has a really amazing photonics ecosystem. I may be a little biased, but I think even if you compare it to other countries, it holds true. However, there are certain challenges the UK faces and opportunities that arise. And I think challenges and opportunities kind of play together. Sometimes, challenges, if you can solve, present opportunities. So these all must be considered together, and we need to understand who needs to take ownership here and try to solve some of these issues. So supply chain vulnerabilities, we'll start with that. So we work very closely with a lot of national security and defense elements, and a big concern at the moment and a big requirement is supply chain sovereignty. So being able to have things done in the UK, or for us to at least have options to diversify our supply chain. And with current geopolitical events and tensions, it's really important for the UK government and also for UK primes to have these kind of capabilities. And these kind of tie together again. So one big thing that we lack, and I think it's been mentioned already, is we don't have a TSMC. We don't have these big semiconductor foundries. We also lack companies like Intel or AMD, big hyperscaler companies who kind of provide extra funding, extra support. They're able to pull through technologies and guide smaller startups or academic institutes. Talent shortages has already been mentioned. We work across a wide range of emerging hardware technologies. So it's not just photonics, but semiconductors, quantum. There's a big issues in getting everything from high school level to undergrad to masters to PhDs. And then on top of that, there's always the concern of brain drain. So the talent leaving the UK. So we spend a lot of money and effort developing this talent, but we want to also retain the talent. And ownership and communication, which is something we see a lot. We saw how complicated photonics is, and it's really difficult for government, industry, startups, academia to communicate, and who takes ownership even within government. There's a lot of different departments, there's a lot of different considerations. So I think, people like techUK do a great job in playing this intermediate, and Plexel also plays a role like this. But it really takes a combined effort from all these players to really maximize the potential impact that the photonics can have in the UK. So how do we turn these into opportunities? So leveraging emerging niches. So we've always had a really good research foundation here. We can do a lot of exciting stuff. I'll touch on a few use cases in a second. But if we can't make our own TSMC, then what do we do? I mean, if we wanted to try and make a TSMC, it would take decades and probably billions and billions of pounds. So one strategy is to find niches and essentially disrupt other countries' vertical supply chains. So we want to make stuff that are so good that other countries have to rely on us. And what that does is provide us with supply chain leverage. So instead of trying to compete with everything, we're only a smaller nation, we pick our niches and we do them well. Investing in pilot lines was mentioned. So photonic integrated circuits can be one, silicon photonics. There could be other options. These pilot lines cost a lot of money to be reasonable. They're probably in the 100 millions range. So we have to be very strategic in how we make a business case, how we benchmark against international examples or maybe contemporaries to really justify the government spending that much money or private industry spending that much money. And then, what ratio is it going to be private investment? Is it going to be government investment? These are all questions that need to be answered and kind of justified. And talent development. So how do we address the issue of skills? And what level do we address it in? Do we focus more on PhDs? Do we focus more on masters, bachelors? Do we maybe put tax breaks? Do we work with industry and government together to co-fund bachelor's degrees or master's degrees? There's loads of potential routes that we explore, and each has their pros and cons, but it's something, again, that needs to be engaged with the whole community and kind of developed as a bigger strategy. And last but not least, opportunities and strategic partnerships. So we can't do everything ourselves. Do we have to do everything ourselves? If we want to create our own TSMC, could we find European partners? Could we find countries like Canada or Australia who also have the same predicaments and work together towards these ends? And we like to use a qualitative, quantitative approach here at Plexel to trying to identify which partners in which areas, looking at patents, academic publications, market analysis would be suitable for the UK to partner with. So UK challenges and opportunities. I feel quite optimistic, and I think, as we can see from here, there's plenty of people doing really amazing things in the UK. I think it's coming together events like this and working across government, academia, startups, and industry to really make a difference. So I would love to talk for hours about photonics. I probably won't be allowed back to talk at techUK if I did that. So I'm just going to pick a couple of really interesting areas that I think show that uniqueness of UK capability and could be useful to support and flourish. And by no means, this is not exhaustive. I chose to not talk about PICs because they've already been covered. So let's start with Scottish SPAD leadership. So what's a SPAD? It's fun to say, that's for sure. But a SPAD is a single photon avalanche diode. So how these work, a photon, a particle of light, you have trillions of them passing through you right now. These detectors or cameras are so sensitive, they can detect one single photon out of trillions. And how do they do this? What happens is you have a photon come and hit your SPAD, your detector, and what this will do is it will produce two electrons, the particles responsible for electricity. And these two electrons they get obviously very frustrated. They've just been hit by a photon. They walk around and then they hit two more electrons each. And what you get is an exponential amplification of these electrons, and you can detect that signal. And that's how SPADs work. And the UK actually has a big legacy in SPADs. We have two startups in the area, Photon Force and a more recent one, Singular Photonics. I think it's reasonable to say global leaders in this space. There's other countries that have strengths over the UK. And the University of Edinburgh and the University of Glasgow, these are both spin-outs from Edinburgh, I believe, have been really crucial in this kind of area. We have SPADs in our current iPhones. They're used for time of flight LiDAR measurement. So this is a mature technology, something the UK has leadership in, and it could be something to leverage and kind of foster a bit more. And the other thing I think that's emerging that's really interesting is photonics for neuromorphic and AI. So neuromorphic is a really interesting area of research. So neuromorphic just means technology that mimics the human brain or the nervous system, or not even the human brain, any brain. So AI has obviously been a very impactful, game-changing technology. However, it costs a lot in terms of energy, which translates to money and environmental damage, to run these kind of AI algorithms. And the reason is because the hardware we use is not really optimized for these matrix vector calculations. So photonics is actually really well primed to do this. Using waveguides, using modulators, there's been a lot of academic activity. There's been two startups in the UK, and there's huge global attempts, the Salience Labs and LumAI. Strathclyde has a photonics for neuromorphic center, which is really amazing. Yeah, and as Justine just said, they're releasing a new center for neuromorphics, so it's between various academics and industrial institutes. Yeah, so that's a really exciting area. And again, these were two use cases which we've had personal experience working in, but there's loads. We could sit here all day talking about them. So it's a really exciting time for UK photonics. However, we need to band together, I think, and we need a strategy, and we need to pick our battles very carefully and try to kind of build that justification of expansion. And that's me. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you, Daniel. That was so comprehensive and insightful and inspiring, I think, as well, in that there's a lot of opportunity for the UK, and you're right, it's about finding our niches. So the good news is for everyone here that we will be working very closely with Justina, the wider Cornerstone team, Daniel, Plexel, and yeah, everyone else that's been mentioned as well, to develop our policy recommendations and to set out just what techUK should be calling for in this space. So stay tuned for that, and please get in touch if you want to shape just what that looks like. Daniel, loads of good questions in the chat. I'm going to let you kind of maybe go back to those in the chat and hand over to Thales from our Satellite and Telecoms program, who will quickly, hopefully in the next 3 minutes, walk us through just what's going on in optical comms, and then we'll save 5 minutes at the end if anyone wants to come off mute and just quickly say who they are and what they're working on. So maybe have a think about that now. But Thales, over to you, and I'll share the slides from my side.
Amazing. Thanks, Rory. Hope you can all hear me okay. Hi everyone, Thales Gasper here from techUK. I'm program manager for satellite in the UK Spectrum Policy Forum. I'll really try to be brief, so next slide. So I think the key element from our program that pertains to this kind of presentation and group is our optical communications roadmap. And this is something that we started at the beginning of the year, around April, and we looked at most of the sides of this market. So the inter-satellite links, which is quite developed and really a force behind sharing information between satellites in orbit. We did an event at the UK Space Conference around ground to satellite communications. And we have another event next week on Monday in Cambridge alongside the Federated Telecoms Hubs and CGI, who's kindly sponsoring us, and we'll sort of discuss the satellite to ground element. There's a little bit of a difference from ground to satellite and satellite to ground, but I hope you can all join the event to really find out what that is. And we'll have our launch event as our summit at the end of the year, which will count with a panel on photonics. So hopefully this is interesting for everyone and everyone would like to attend as well. This is not that important. It's just more about the application side. We're trying to move ahead with the network convergence piece that we did. And this roundtable will sort of bring it all together. There is an element of fixed and fiber to it, but it's mostly about how we can, put two infrastructures together, terrestrial and non-terrestrial. Next slide. And just to flag that we have an awareness day on intelligent networks coming up. It presents everything around the application of AI, machine learning for telecommunications. So really, if you have a case study on how you're implementing one of those software technologies to photonics and implementing communications or other use cases, do feel free to get in touch. We still have slots for that campaign, and we're going to host a webinar on how to adopt AI in telecoms as a whole responsibly. And I think I'll just finalize with signposting a few of other events that our program is hosting. So we have a couple webinars and roundtables taking place, also an event in Birmingham, and all it's about applications in telecoms, but hopefully once you have a lot more of a technical crowd, you can really get into the nitty-gritty of how this will be developed and how we can achieve our digital infrastructure ambitions. So I guess that's it from me. Past 1 minute from the proposal, but I'll put some links in the chat.
Amazing, thanks Thales. That was really speedy, but loads of good links there. We'll share the slides after this webinar as well, but appreciate you posting in the chat. And looking forward to our Photonics for Space panel as well that you mentioned at the launch event of the roadmap. Brilliant. What I'm going to quickly do is, before we get to attendee updates, just share one thing that's coming up that is kind of the biggest event of the year for us that I'd very much like to flag, which is our Tech and Innovation Summit. It's our 3rd year of running this. First year we're moving outside of techUK's venue, which is exciting. And long story short, this is what the agenda looks like. So everything, we'll be exploring the next decade of UK innovation. We'll have Innovate UK's chief futurist to kick us off. We'll have keynotes and fireside chats from Professor Ian Chapman, the new chief executive of UKRI, which will be very exciting, and Laura Willits as well, the first chair of the Regulatory Innovation Office, and then panels on everything from the future of robotics and automation to quantum commercialization and AGI and a few other topics as well. So I'll leave the link there if you want to quickly scan it and sign up, but should be a really good one, in part for us to have a chat with Ian Chapman and put photonics on the radar and get him to say a little bit about that as well, so we can begin championing the sector, I think, or through that event as well. Brilliant. So as promised, we've just got a few minutes. If we were going to do this in person originally, but if anyone would like to come off mute and or put it in the chat and just say, in less than 30 seconds, maybe 20 seconds, who you are and what you're working on and how people can reach out to you. If there's anything, opportunities for collaboration, that sort of thing. So I'll hand over to attendees.
I'll break
Don't
the
be
ice
shy.
if I may. Yeah, hi.
Go for it.
Hi everyone. So I'm Robert. I'm at the National Physical Laboratory, and one of the ways we support SMEs is by running tests on their novel and emerging components. And what that brings is an additional layer of confidence in the marketplace that these novel components have indeed been robustly tested. There's various ways that you can access the MPL. You can do so under private contract, but there are also various schemes in which you pay part or none of the amount. So if anybody's interested in those, do drop me a line. I'm sure my email's in the group there. So, but it's robert.dandridge@mpl.co.uk.
Brilliant. Thanks, Robert. And if you do want to just, I think, post your email in the chat just so it's there, that'd be brilliant. But NPL, very valued member of techUK, so that's great. Thanks for flagging. Anybody else like to quickly jump in before we wrap up?
Taking the opportunity just after Robert, my colleague. Yeah, my name is Mayela Romero, and I'm also part of the National Physical Laboratory. Well, my background, or I'm a higher scientist at NPL. My background is basically in plasmonic metamaterials, and currently I'm leading our internal national measurement system project on metrology for metamaterials manufacturing. So this has been really interesting for me, like personally. So I know photonics is like in like a wider and a bigger stage where metamaterials somehow fit. And of course, it's of great interest for us to see where the landscape in photonics in the UK is moving towards. So we are at the moment, like I would say, a little bit similar to the photonics challenge. There's a metamaterials challenge from the point of view where there's actually the need to understand, for example, what kind of metrology or evaluation and testing and other challenges industries working in this area face in order to more widely basically use or integrate metamaterials into different technologies. So, I mean, I will be interesting to kind of follow, let's say, like your events and where the strategy goes. But at the same time, at NPL, this first year of the project, we are basically focusing also in road mapping where those industrial needs are. So if we could somehow like get in touch and sort of like talk about like how these two areas will overlap, or like, yeah, what common points they will face, it will be really interesting. So also I will put my email in the chat in case anyone is interested in keeping the discussion. And nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you for flagging. I'm just going to end by saying thank you, everyone, for joining this kickoff event for our Photonics Sprint campaign. Please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Ella, or if you'd like to get involved. I wouldn't be myself if I didn't put my LinkedIn there, but that's where you might find out about everything that's coming up across techUK on emerging tech. And there's also a QR code to find out more about the Sprint campaign. So thanks everyone for joining. We'll be in touch with the slides and the recording, and really looking forward to working with loads of you over the next 5 months as we explore the future of photonic technologies. So thanks to our speakers, and thanks for joining.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.